A single father went on a blind date when she pointed to her necklace and said, "That woman is just like my adopted daughter." And they both burst into tears. Secrets came to light, and their lives changed forever. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment on where you are watching from. The fine drizzle of May painted the windows of the Skyline Bistro with small droplets that lazily trickled down the glass, creating a melancholic scene that perfectly matched Richard Morgan's state of mind. At 42, the finance executive nervously adjusted his navy blue tie, his long, carefully manicured fingers trembling slightly as he watched the hustle and bustle of Fifth Avenue below. His impeccably tailored charcoal grey suit contrasted with the restlessness that shone in his dark brown eyes, framed by wrinkles that betrayed 5 years of sleepless nights. "Dad, you need to stop living like a ghost," Sophie had insisted the previous morning, her 17 years overflowing with teenage determination. "Mom, Helen wouldn't want you to stay like this forever." Richard sighed deeply, recalling that conversation. Sophie was a bright girl with wavy brown hair that reached her waist and expressive green eyes that always seemed to see beyond what was appropriate for her age. Adopted when she was just 6 months old, she had become the center of his world after Helen died in a car accident. Guilt still consumed him. If he hadn't worked late that night, maybe he would have been driving instead of his wife. "Sorry for the delay," a warm female voice pulled him from his dark thoughts. Richard turned and felt the air escape his lungs. In front of him was a woman of natural and radiant beauty, about 5'3", with auburn hair cascading over her shoulders and almond-shaped eyes sparkling with a mix of nervousness and curiosity. She wore a teal dress with 3/4 sleeves that accentuated her curvy silhouette without being provocative, and a silk scarf that danced lightly to the rhythm of her graceful movements. "Don't worry, I just arrived too," she politely lied, extending her hand. "Richard Morgan." "Mary Smith," she replied, her smile revealing white, straight teeth. Her light brown skin had a natural golden hue, and delicate freckles dotted her nose. "What an amazing view! I've never been here before." As they settled at the reserved table near the window, Richard noticed how Mary observed everything around her with the eyes of someone who appreciates the details. The classic decor of the restaurant, the city lights beginning to twinkle with twilight, the subtle aroma of spices wafting from the kitchen. There was something maternal and welcoming in her demeanor, as if she were constantly assessing the environment to ensure everyone felt comfortable. "So, do you work in education?" Richard asked, trying to break the initial ice. "I've been a teacher for 15 years, Mary nodded, absent-mindedly fiddling with a delicate necklace she wore. "I mainly work with underprivileged children on the East Side. And you? I heard you're an executive. Financial director of a multinational," he replied automatically, but something in his tone suggested that the job had lost its meaning long ago. "I confess I'm not quite sure why I'm here. My daughter practically forced me to join this program." Mary laughed softly, a melodious sound that made Richard relax his shoulders for the first time in weeks. "My best friend signed me up without telling me. She said I needed to start believing in love again." She made air quotes with her fingers, a light blush tinting her cheeks. That's when it happened. As Mary tucked her hair behind her ear, her blouse shifted slightly, fully revealing the pendant of her necklace, a delicately crafted butterfly in silver with small blue enamel details. At the same time, Richard leaned slightly forward, and under his tie appeared an identical necklace featuring the same silver butterfly. The silence that followed was deafening. Mary brought her hand to her chest, her eyes widening in astonishment, while Richard stood completely paralyzed, his mind trying to process the impossibility of that coincidence. This This can't be real." Mary whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Where did you buy that necklace?" Richard asked with difficulty, his words coming out in a whisper. "At the Black Pearl jewelry store downtown," she replied, still in shock. "On Seminary Street. It was last week, the day my friend signed me up for the program. And you?" "Exactly the same place on the same day," he murmured, feeling his legs weaken. "The saleswoman, an elderly lady with grey hair. She told a story about a craftsman who made a limited collection after losing his granddaughter." Mary completed the sentence, tears beginning to stream down her face. "She said they were unique pieces that brought luck for fateful encounters." Richard's tears began to fall without warning, breaking the composure he had maintained for years. Here was a man used to controlling numbers, spreadsheets and reports, completely bewildered by a coincidence that defied all logic. Mary instinctively reached her hand across the table, lightly touching his fingers, in a gesture of natural comfort. "I'm sorry," he tried to compose himself, wiping his face with the napkin. "I don't usually. I'm not one to cry like this." "You don't need to apologize," Mary said, softly, her own voice still trembling. It's impossible to be just a coincidence." The waiter approached discreetly, sensing the emotional tension at the table, but Richard gestured for him to wait. He needed to understand what was happening. He needed to process this moment that felt like it had come straight out of a movie. "Do you believe in fate?" Mary asked, still lightly holding his hand. "Up until 5 minutes ago, I would have said no," Richard admitted, watching how the light from the restaurant chandelier created golden reflections in her hair. "But now, I don't know. I don't know what to think anymore. I've always been skeptical about these things," she confessed. "I'm a practical, scientific person. But when I saw your necklace, it was as if my heart recognized something my mind can't explain." They spent the rest of the night talking about their lives, sharing stories that would normally take months to reveal. Richard spoke about Helen, the guilt he carried, and how Sophie had become his only motivation to keep living. Mary shared her latest heartbreak, about how she had closed herself off from relationships after discovering that her ex-fiancé was cheating on her with a co-worker. "Is Sophie adopted?" Mary asked delicately when he mentioned that his daughter wasn't biologically his. "Since she was a baby. Helen and I tried to have children for years, and when we met Sophie at the orphanage, it was love at first sight. She was so small, so fragile, but she had these green eyes that seemed to see into our souls." Something changed in Mary's expression at that moment, a shadow passing quickly through her eyes, but she merely nodded in understanding. When they finally said goodbye at the restaurant door, it was already past midnight. The drizzle had stopped, leaving the streets washed and shining under the streetlights. Richard offered to call her a cab, but Mary preferred to take the subway from the Republic station. "I would really like to see you again," he said, surprising himself with his honesty. "I would like that too," she replied, smiling for the first time since they saw the necklaces. "Maybe we can figure out together what all of this means." When he got home to his duplex apartment in Maplewood, Richard found Sophie waiting in the living room, pretending to study for a practice exam, but obviously anxious for the details of the meeting. "So, how was it?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Richard sat down next to his daughter on the beige leather sofa, observing for a moment her wavy hair, so different from his. Over the years he had wondered what Sophie's biological mother would be like if she had the same penetrating green eyes, the same stubborn smile. "It was unexpected," he finally said, unconsciously touching the necklace he still wore. "Very unexpected." "Unexpected how?" Sophie insisted, her eyes shining with curiosity. "As if the universe conspired to put us in The same place, Richard murmured, still trying to understand what had happened that night. Sophie smiled, satisfied with her father's evasive answer. She had no idea that at that very moment, less than 20 kilometers away, Mary was sitting in her small kitchen in Maplewood, holding the butterfly necklace, and wondering if those green eyes that had impressed her so much in Richard's description were the same ones she had seen in dreams for 17 years. The cheerful sound of accordions and drums echoed through the Largo da Batata Square, where the traditional June festival in the Pinheiros neighborhood transformed the urban asphalt into a piece of northeastern countryside. Colorful flags fluttered in the cool June night breeze, and the intoxicating aroma of hot mulled wine, peanut candy, and roasted corn created a cozy atmosphere that contrasted with the chilly weather. Richard adjusted the red and black plaid shirt that Sophie had insisted he wear, feeling out of place amidst so much festive spirit. "Relax, Dad. You look like a robot programmed to smile," Sophie laughed, adjusting her own festive outfit, a flared blue skirt with ruffles and a white puff-sleeved blouse that highlighted her youth. Her hair was styled in 2 braids adorned with colorful ribbons, and she looked genuinely excited about the festival. "I'm not used to these things," Richard murmured, watching the couples dancing in the center of the square. "Your mother, Helen, loved parties like this. She said I was too uptight." "Mom was right," Sophie smiled affectionately, linking her arm with her father's. "But look who's over there." Richard followed his daughter's gaze and felt his heart race. Mary was near the candy booth, wearing a floral sundress in shades of pink and red that accentuated her feminine silhouette. Her reddish-brown hair was loose, with a pink artificial flower pinned to the side, and she was chatting animatedly with an older woman while savoring a piece of coconut candy. "Go talk to her," Sophie gently nudged her father. "Or do you want me to go make the introduction?" "Sophie, don't be—" But she had already run toward Mary before he could finish the sentence. "Hi, you must be Mary." Sophie introduced herself with the typical enthusiasm of teenagers. "I'm Sophie, Richard's daughter. He talked a lot about you." Mary turned, and when her eyes met Sophie's, something changed in her expression. She paled slightly, as if she had seen a ghost, but quickly recovered with a warm smile. "Hi, Sophie. What a pleasure to meet you," she said, extending her hand to the girl. "Your dad really wasn't exaggerating when he said you were beautiful. Those green eyes are stunning." "Genetic inheritance from who knows who," Sophie laughed casually, but Mary noticed a shadow of melancholy passing over her face. "Sometimes I wonder what my biological mother would be like." "Sophie!" Richard finally approached, clearly embarrassed by his daughter's frankness. "Sorry, she doesn't have a filter when she gets excited." "No problem," Mary assured, but her hands trembled slightly. "It's natural to be curious about our origins." The older woman accompanying Mary stepped closer, observing the interaction with interest. She was Grace Johnson, 68 years old, Mary's mother, a short, stout woman with completely white hair tied in a bun and almond-shaped eyes identical to her daughter's. She wore a navy floral dress and a beige crocheted shawl that she had made herself. "Mom, these are Richard and Sophie, the ones I told you about," Mary introduced them, noticing the penetrating look her mother directed at the couple. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Johnson," Richard greeted respectfully, extending his hand. "The hand." "The pleasure is mine," Grace replied, but there was something calculating in her voice. "Mary told me about you. What an interesting coincidence, isn't it? Those identical necklaces." "Mom," Mary gently alerted, recognizing her mother's inquisitive tone. "What necklaces?" Sophie asked curiously, looking back and forth between her father and Mary. Richard and Mary exchanged glances, and he decided to show the necklace he wore under his shirt, When Sophie saw the two identical butterflies, her eyes widened. "Oh my God, this is impossible," she exclaimed, delicately touching Mary's pendant. "Where did you buy them?" "At the same jewelry store on the same day," Mary explained softly. "It's a long story." "Which I want to hear," Sophie insisted, but was interrupted by the start of a new square dance. "How about we dance?" Richard suggested impulsively, surprising himself. "It's been years since I danced square dance." "I would love to," Mary accepted, her eyes sparkling with the prospect. They joined the other couples in the center of the square, where an entertainer dressed as a clown led the steps with a loud and lively voice. "Look out for the snake. Just kidding. Swing. Path to the field. To your places." During the dance, Richard and Mary moved closer and farther apart, following the commands, but each touch, each exchanged glance, intensified the connection they had felt at the restaurant. Sophie watched from a distance, along with Grace, who maintained a worried expression. "Your daughter is very beautiful," Grace commented, not taking her eyes off Sophie. "How old is she?" 17. She'll be 18 in November," Grace replied automatically, before questioning why the woman seemed so interested. "November?" Grace murmured thoughtfully. "And how long ago did you adopt her?" "When she was 6 months old." "Why?" "Just a grandmother's curiosity," Grace lied, but her heart raced. The dates perfectly coincided with those that haunted her daughter 17 years ago. When the music ended, Richard and Mary were breathless and smiling, a natural closeness having developed between them. They walked to one of the stalls to buy hot apple cider, and Sophie joined them, still fascinated by the story of the necklaces. "You have to tell me all the details," she insisted, grabbing a steaming mug of cider. "This is like something out of a movie." "Well," Richard began, but was interrupted by a familiar, an unwelcome voice. "What a surprise to find you here." Everyone turned to see Claudia Morgan, Richard's ex-sister-in-law, approaching with a forced smile. At 45, Claudia maintained an impeccable appearance, perfectly styled blonde hair, professional makeup, and designer clothes even for a square dance. She wore a chic version of country attire, a white linen shirt tied at the waist and a designer denim skirt. Her light blue eyes analyzed Mary with a calculating coldness. "Hi, Aunt Claudia," Sophie greeted without much enthusiasm. "And this must be Richard's famous companion," Claudia said, extending a manicured hand to Mary. "Claudia." "Morgan. I was Richard's sister-in-law." "Mary Smith. Nice to meet you," Mary replied politely, but feeling the tension in the air. "What a lively party, don't you think?" Claudia continued, but her eyes never left Mary. "Although it's not exactly the type of event Richard usually attends, Helen always said he preferred more sophisticated environments." The comment hit its mark. Richard felt his jaw tighten, while Mary slightly lowered her gaze, clearly uncomfortable with the insinuation. "People change, Claudia," Richard said firmly, "and I'm really enjoying the party." Of course," Claudia smiled falsely. "It's just that I worry about you. Sophie is practically my daughter too, since Helen... Well, you know, I just want to make sure that strange people don't take advantage of the situation." "Aunt Claudia!" Sophie protested, clearly embarrassed. "Don't worry, Sophie," Mary said softly, but there was a firmness in her voice. "I understand your aunt's concern. It's natural to want to protect those we love." "How understanding," Claudia retorted with barely concealed sarcasm. "How lucky to have found such a well-structured family. It must be hard for a teacher to maintain the standard of living that Sophie is used to." "That's enough, Claudia." Richard exploded, his patience finally wearing thin. "You don't have the right to—" "Dad, let's go," Sophie interrupted, grabbing her father's arm. "Please." Mary gently touched Richard's shoulder. "It's okay. Maybe it's best if we end the night here." As they said their goodbyes, Grace watched the whole scene with an increasingly worried expression. She had noticed how Sophie gestured when she spoke, the same hand movement that Mary made when she was nervous. She had noticed how the girl scrunched her nose when she laughed, exactly like her daughter did. But most importantly, she had noticed how Sophie's green eyes sparkled with a disturbing familiarity. "Mary," she called her daughter as they headed home on the bus. "Did you notice anything strange about that girl?" "What do you mean?" Mary asked, but her voice trembled slightly. "She reminds me of someone. I can't stop thinking. Those eyes, the gestures." Mary fell silent for a long moment, watching the city lights pass by the bus window. Her mind was in turmoil, long-buried memories beginning to emerge like fragments of a forgotten dream. "Mom, do you think it's possible that fate has a plan?" she finally asked. "I don't know, daughter, but I know that some coincidences are too great to be mere chance." That night, in their respective homes, both Richard and Mary stayed awake late, each processing the events of the party and battling the growing sensation that their lives were connected by something much greater than a simple blind date. Sophie, for her part, wrote in her diary about the strange feeling of familiarity she had experienced when meeting Mary, unaware that miles away, Mary herself was silently crying, holding a faded photo she had kept for 17 years. The smell of fresh coffee and sweet bread lingered in the air of Bella Vista Bakery, in the heart of Little Italy, where Mary's Italian family. Mary had been gathering with her family every Sunday for over 3 decades. The establishment, with its exposed brick walls and black and white photographs of early Italian immigration, had become a second home for the Smiths over the years. Mary arrived late, still trying to process the events of the previous night's summer festival, and found her family already settled at the round table in the back. "Finally!" exclaimed Grandma Frances, the 82-year-old matriarch with completely white hair styled in an elaborate updo, and bright blue eyes that still sparkled with vitality. She wore a simple black dress and a pearl necklace that had been in the family for generations. "We were starting to worry, cara mia." "Sorry, Grandma. I didn't sleep well," Mary lied, kissing her grandmother's forehead before sitting next to her cousin Gabriella, a striking 35-year-old criminal defense attorney. "Did you not sleep well, or did you arrive late?" teased Vincent, the 60-year-old uncle who ran an olive oil import business. His grey hair was slicked back, and he wore a navy polo shirt that accentuated his prominent belly. "Grace told us about your little encounter at the summer festival." "It wasn't a little encounter, it was a coincidence," Mary retorted, pouring herself coffee from the floral porcelain pot the family had used for decades. "Coincidence, my foot," Grace interjected, adjusting herself in her chair. "That girl. There's something familiar about her, Frances. You should have seen." Grandma Frances narrowed her eyes, studying her granddaughter's face. At 82, she had developed a keen intuition about family secrets. "Di che cosa stai parlando?" she asked in Italian, as she always did when she wanted an honest answer. "What are you talking about?" "It's about that executive Mary is seeing," explained Joseph, the younger cousin at 30, who worked as a chef in a renowned restaurant. His dark hair was tousled, and he wore a simple black T-shirt. "Apparently he has an adopted daughter." "And so?" Gabriella asked, cutting a generous slice of focaccia. "I don't see a problem." "The problem," Vincent said gravely, resting his elbows on the table, "is that our Mary can't just get involved with anyone. She needs someone from our community who understands our values." "Uncle Vincent," Mary tried to protest. "No, my dear," he continued, gesturing dramatically. "You're over 30 now. You can't just pick any guy that comes along, and this man, he has too much money. Rich men don't marry working women like you. They have fun and then go back to their world." What prejudice! Gabriella defended her cousin. Mary has every right to choose whoever she wants. Gabriella is right, Joseph supported. Besides, the 21st century has reached even here in Little Italy, Uncle. Grandma Frances slammed her coffee cup down on the saucer, silencing everyone. When she wanted attention, the family matriarch knew exactly how to get it. "Enough," she said, in a low but firm voice. "Mary, tell me about this girl, his daughter." "Grandma, it's nothing serious." Mary tried to divert the topic. "How old is she?" 17. She'll be 18 in November. "And when was she adopted?" Mary hesitated, feeling the weight of her grandmother's penetrating gaze. "When she was a baby. 6 months, I think." Grace and Grandma Frances exchanged a significant look, a silent communication that only women of the same family could maintain after decades of living together. "Mary," Grandma Frances said slowly, "are you sure you want to keep seeing this man?" "Why is everyone acting like it's a crime?" Mary exploded, her patience finally wearing thin. "I deserve to be happy. I deserve a second chance at love." "No one is saying you don't deserve it," Vincent tried to soften. "But think about it. He's rich, you're a teacher. He lives on the Upper West Side, you live in Maplewood. He has a teenage daughter who will need all his attention. Where do you fit into this story?" "Maybe she fits in as a mother," Joseph said thoughtfully. "Sometimes fate has plans we don't understand." "Joseph!" Grace sharply reprimanded him. "Don't talk nonsense." But his words echoed in Mary's mind like an alarm bell. Throughout the morning coffee, she could barely eat, her memories bombarded by fragmented images she had spent years trying to forget. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Richard faced his own family inquisition. Claudia had shown up at his apartment unannounced, carrying a tray of croissants from an expensive French bakery and an expression of feigned concern. "We need to talk," she announced, invading the kitchen as if she owned the place. Sophie was in her room studying, so they had privacy to speak. "If it's about last night, I don't want to hear it," Richard said firmly, pouring coffee for both of them. "Richard, listen to me." Claudia took on a maternal tone that always irritated him. "I've known Helen since childhood. We were like sisters. Do you think I don't want your happiness?" "Frankly, I don't know what you want anymore." Claudia sighed dramatically, sitting down at the kitchen's mahogany table. "Look, I investigated this Mary. She lives in Maplewood, works at a public school, and makes a miserable salary. Don't you find it strange that a woman like that shows up in your life right now?" "Strange how?" "Think about it, Richard. Sophie is almost 18. In a few months, she'll have access to the trust fund Helen left. It's almost $2 million. Richard felt his blood run cold. "Are you implying that—" "I'm implying nothing. I'm stating it." Claudia stood up, pacing the kitchen. "Women like this Mary know exactly how to seduce vulnerable men. First, they win over the father, then they get close to the daughter, and before you know it, she's controlling the whole family. Stop with this paranoia, Claudia." "Paranoia?" She bitterly laughed. "Richard, you don't even know her real last name. Do you know where she lived before? Who she dated? Why is a woman nearly 40 years old still single?" "Because her ex-fiancé cheated on her," Richard replied automatically, but immediately he realized he had fallen into a trap. "And are you sure it's true?" Claudia smiled with satisfaction. "Or is it just what she told you?" Richard fell silent, hating to admit that Claudia had planted a seed of doubt in his mind. He really didn't know much about Mary's life beyond what she had shared. "And there's one more thing," Claudia continued, seeing that she had captured his attention. "This story about the identical necklaces is very convenient, don't you think? What smart woman wouldn't research the man she's going out with? She could have found out about your tastes, your habits, and planned this whole coincidence." That's ridiculous. Is it? Then explain how two complete strangers buy identical necklaces at the same store on the same day and then randomly meet on a television show. Richard felt his confidence begin to waver. Claudia's relentless logic had always been her most powerful weapon, and he hated to admit that she was making sense. "What do you want me to do?" he finally asked. "Hire a private investigator," Claudia replied immediately. "Find out who this woman really is. If she's honest, you have nothing to lose. But if I'm right, well, it's better to find out now than after she's got her claws sunk into your bank account." That afternoon, Mary walked through Liberty Square, trying to clear her mind after the tense lunch with her family. The cherry trees were blooming, creating a light pink carpet on the ground, and the calm Sunday atmosphere provided the perfect contrast to her agitated thoughts. That's when her phone rang. The name Richard appeared on the screen, and she felt her heart race. "Hi," she answered, trying to sound casual. "Hi. How was lunch with the family?" "Interesting," she laughed nervously. "And you? How's Sophie?" "Studying. Listen, Mary, I was thinking, we've only known each other for a few weeks and everything has happened so fast. Maybe we should take it slower." His tone was different, more distant, and Mary felt a chill in her stomach. "Take it slower how?" "Get to know each other better before involving Sophie in all of this. She gets attached easily, and would that be a problem?" "It could be, if things don't work out between us." Mary stopped walking, leaning against one of the trees in the square. Tears began to form in her eyes. "Richard, has something happened? You're talking as if you've already decided it won't work." "I haven't decided anything, I'm just being realistic. We're from very different worlds." "And since when does that matter?" "It's always mattered, Mary. Maybe we were just fantasizing." "Fantasizing?" Her voice faltered. "Is that what you felt? A fantasy?" Richard fell silent on the other end of the line, and in that silence Mary heard the answer she didn't want to accept. "I understand," she finally said, wiping her tears. "Thank you for being honest." "Mary." "No, it's okay, you're right. We're from different worlds. I thought that didn't matter." She hung up before he could respond, standing there in the middle of the square, feeling as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. A few people passed by, looking curiously at the woman crying alone under a cherry tree, but Mary didn't even notice. Her mind flew back to that afternoon, 17 years ago, when she had handed a green-eyed baby to a couple who promised to love her forever. She had cried the same way that day, feeling as if she were losing a part of her soul. Now, inexplicably, she felt the same pain, and she began to wonder if coincidences really existed, or if fate was just cruel enough to show you what you couldn't have. The autumn rain beat insistently against the windows of the Hope Institute, creating a melancholic rhythm that matched Mary's state of mind. She was organizing donation boxes in the archive room of what had once been the St. Clara Orphanage, now transformed into a support center for underprivileged families. 2 weeks had passed since her conversation with Richard, and she had thrown herself into volunteer work as a way to forget the pain of rejection. "Mary, you don't have to do this alone," said Sister Beatrice, a 55-year-old nun who ran the institute. Her grey hair slightly escaped from her veil, and her brown eyes radiated the kindness of someone who had dedicated her life to helping others. "The donations can wait." "It's fine, sister. I need to keep busy," Mary replied, continuing to catalogue children's clothes on a spreadsheet. "Besides, these campaigns are important. You've been like this since you started working here. What's going on?" Mary stopped working, holding a small pink shirt with delicate embroidery. For a moment, she was transported back in time, remembering when she folded similar clothes for a green-eyed baby she had cared for so lovingly. "Sister, do you remember me, when I volunteered here?" "Of course I remember." Sister Beatrice smiled warmly. You were so young, so dedicated, especially with that little one. What was her name again?" Mary's heart raced. "Which child?" "The green-eyed girl you loved so much. Sophie, wasn't it? You spent hours with her, singing lullabies. You even talked about trying to adopt her." Mary's hands trembled, dropping the shirt she was holding. "Sophie? Yes, a beautiful little baby. She was adopted by a wonderful couple. Let me see. Morgan, if I'm not mistaken. You were very sad when she left." Mary's world stopped. The sound of the rain faded. The voices of the Institute became a distant murmur, and she felt as if all the pieces of an impossible puzzle were fitting together in a way her mind refused to accept. "Sister, are you sure? Sophie Morgan?" "Absolutely. Why are you asking? You look pale." Mary leaned against the table, her legs feeling weak. I need to see the files, the old documents." "Mary, what's going on?" "Please, Sister Beatrice, it's very important." 20 minutes later, Mary was sitting in a plastic chair in front of an old wooden table, holding a yellowed folder. Sister Beatrice had found the records from 17 years ago, and now she watched with concern as Mary flipped through the documents with trembling hands. "Here," Mary whispered, finding the file she was looking for. Sophie Helen Smith. Entry, April 15, 2008. Mother, Camilla Smith. Deceased due to complications from leukemia. Father, unknown. Tears began to fall onto the aged paper as she read her own handwriting from years ago. Normal development baby, green eyes, brown hair, very calm, smiles easily, responsible caregiver Mary Smith, volunteer. "My God," Sister Beatrice murmured, realizing the magnitude of the revelation. "Mary, It's the daughter of the man I was dating," Mary completed, her voice broken with emotion. "The girl I cared for, as if she were my own daughter, is the Sophie I met at the summer festival." On the second page of the folder, there were photos. Mary found a small image of baby Sophie sleeping, and next to it, a photo from the adoption day. There were Richard and Helen Morgan, younger, smiling as they held little Sophie. And in the background of the photo, slightly out of focus, was herself, watching the scene with tears in her eyes. "I was there," she whispered, gently touching the photo. "I was there the day she found her family. And now she has found you again," Sister Beatrice said softly, sitting next to Mary. "God works in mysterious ways." Mary continued flipping through the documents until she found something that made her heart stop completely. It was a report signed by her, specifically recommending the Morgan couple for Sophie's adoption. "October 15th, 2008, she read aloud. "After interviewing the couple Richard and Helen Morgan, I strongly recommend the adoption of Sophie. Mr. Morgan demonstrates emotional and financial stability, while Mrs. Morgan shows genuine maternal love. I believe they will provide Sophie with the loving home she deserves." The couple even brought a special gift for the girl, a necklace with a butterfly pendant, which they consider a symbol of transformation and new beginnings. The pieces finally fell into place: the necklace, the recommendation, the inexplicable connection she had felt with Sophie from the very first moment. "Mary, you need to tell them," Sister Beatrice said firmly. "This is not a coincidence. It's a miracle." "I can't." Mary shook her head, drying her tears. "He made it clear he doesn't want to see me anymore. What if they think I planned all of this, that I manipulated the situation?" "But you didn't do that. How am I going to prove it? Who will believe in such a coincidence?" That same afternoon, on the other side of the city, Sophie was in her room organizing documents for college when she found a box hidden at the back of her closet. It was a pink shoebox, tied with a faded blue ribbon that she had never seen before. Curious, she opened the box and found treasures from her childhood, certificates, photographs, and a sealed envelope with her name written in cursive. Inside the envelope was a letter. My dear Sophie, she read softly, if you are reading this, it means you have grown up and are ready to learn. Your story. It was a letter from Helen, written shortly before she died, explaining details about the adoption that Richard had never shared. Sophie read with tears in her eyes, discovering how her adoptive parents had struggled to have children, how they met her at the orphanage, and how a young volunteer had been instrumental in making the adoption happen. The girl who cared for you at the orphanage loved you like a daughter, Helen had written. She cried when you left, but she said she knew you were going to the right place. Her name was Mary, and she was an angel in our lives. If you ever want to find her, the documents are in this box. Sophie dropped the letter, her heart racing uncontrollably. Mary. The same Mary that her father had rejected. The same Mary she had felt an instant connection with at the summer festival. Desperate, she rummaged through the box until she found the orphanage documents. There was the full name, Mary Smith, and a photo of her with baby Sophie, both smiling at the camera. "Dad!" she shouted, running to the living room where Richard was working on his laptop. "What is it?" "Sophie, why didn't you tell me about Mary from the orphanage?" Richard went pale. Where did you find this?" "It doesn't matter where. Why did you break up with her without knowing who she really was?" "Sophie, it's complicated." "Complicated nothing." Sophie was furious, tears streaming down her face. "You dismissed the woman who cared for me before you adopted me, the woman who placed me in your arms." "That's impossible." "It is possible." She threw the photo on his desk. "Look at this photo, Dad. Look at the date on the back. It's the same Mary. Fate brought her back to our family and you sent her away." Richard took the photo with trembling hands, his eyes filling with tears as he recognized the young Mary holding his baby daughter. On the back, in cursive, it read, "Mary and Sophie. Last photo before the adoption, 10/16/2008. "My God," he whispered, "what have I done?" "You destroyed our chance of being a real family," Sophie said, her voice broken with pain. "Mummy Helen always said that Mary was an angel, and you treated her like she was an opportunist." Richard abruptly stood up, grabbing the car keys. "Where are you going?" Sophie asked. "To fix the biggest mistake of my life." But when he arrived at the Hope Institute 40 minutes later, Mary had already left. Sister Beatrice. He was greeted at the door, her face showing that she knew exactly why he was there. "She found out," the nun said simply. "Where is she?" "She went home. But Mr. Morgan, she is very shaken. Do you think you will believe she planned everything? How could she have planned it? It's impossible." I told her that. But sometimes pain makes us believe in things that don't make sense. Richard ran back to the car, determined to find Mary and ask for forgiveness, unaware that she was, at that very moment, sitting on the bus that was taking her home, resolved to distance herself forever from a family she had learned to love twice in her life and had lost twice due to circumstances beyond her control. The rain continued to fall over São Paulo, as if the city itself were crying for the separation of souls that fate had worked 17 years to bring together. The deafening noise of a motorcycle cutting through the early morning made the street dogs bark in chorus. Sophie had waited for her father to fall asleep to execute her desperate escape plan. Dressed in dark jeans, sneakers, and a leather jacket she had borrowed from her cousin, she held tightly to Lucas's waist, her best friend since childhood, as he rode the motorcycle through the deserted streets of São Paulo towards his parents' apartment in the Arts District. "Are you sure about this, Soph?" Lucas shouted over the noise of the engine. At 18, he was a tall and slender guy, with tousled light brown hair and blue eyes that showed unwavering loyalty to his friend. "Your dad is going to be desperate." "Let him deal with it," she replied, tightening her grip. "I'm tired of being treated like a child." Lucas's parents' apartment was a modern loft on the third floor of a building without a doorman, decorated with vintage furniture and plants scattered throughout. Mary and Robert Smith were a couple of artists in their 50s who always kept their doors open for their son's friends. Mary, a petite and energetic woman with grey hair cut in a modern bob, welcomed Sophie with a tight hug. "My God, child, what's with that face?" she asked, noticing the swollen eyes from crying. "Lucas told me something, but—" "Aunt Mary, can I stay here for a few days?" Sophie interrupted, her voice choked. "I had a fight with my dad, and I have nowhere to go." "Of course you can, sweetheart. But don't you think we should talk about what happened?" Sophie collapsed onto the moss-green velvet sofa, pouring out the whole story. The necklaces, the blind date, the discovery about Mary, and how her father had rejected the only person who could complete their family. Mary listened, attentively, offering chamomile tea and homemade cookies while the girl vented her frustrations. "I understand your anger," Mary finally said, sitting next to Sophie, "but running away from home won't solve anything. It will only create more pain for everyone." "He doesn't listen to me," Sophie exploded. "He never listens. Ever since Mom Helen died, he's been living in his own little world, making decisions for the whole family without asking how I feel." Meanwhile, just a few blocks away, Richard was desperately walking through the wet streets of Maplewood, trying to find Mary's house. He had already circled the neighborhood 3 times, stopping at bakeries, pharmacies, and bars to ask if anyone knew Mary Smith. The rain had stopped, but the cold of the early morning cut through his bones, and he regretted leaving with only a dress shirt. "Please, sir," he pleaded with a security guard at a residential building. "It's very important that I find her. It's about her daughter. I mean, about my daughter. It's complicated." "My friend, it's already 2 in the morning," the man replied with some patience. "Come back in the morning. If she lives in the neighborhood, someone will know during business hours." Richard knew the man was right, but the urgency he felt wouldn't allow him to wait. Every passing minute was another minute for Mary to convince herself that he had rejected her out of prejudice or malice. His phone rang, and he answered immediately, hoping it was Sophie. "Richard, it's Claudia. Is Sophie there? I'm worried. She isn't answering her phone." "What do you mean she isn't there?" Panic took over his voice. "I thought she had gone to your house." "No, she hasn't shown up here. Richard, what's going on? Why do you sound like that?" Richard ran back to the car, quickly explaining to Claudia about the discovery of the connection with Mary while speeding back to Upper West Side. Upon arriving home, he confirmed his worst fears. Sophie's bed was empty, and there was a note on the pillow. "Dad, I need some time to think. Don't look for me. I'm safe, and will come back when you fix things with Mary. I love you, but I'm very disappointed. Sophie." "My God," Claudia whispered when he read the note over the phone. "She ran away?" "And it's all my fault." Richard collapsed into a kitchen chair, running his hands through his hair. "Claudia, you were wrong about Mary, completely wrong." "How so?" "She's the volunteer who took care of Sophie at the orphanage. She's the one who recommended us for adoption. She's not an opportunist. She's the person who made our family possible." On the other end of the line, Claudia was silent for a long moment. "Richard, that's impossible. I have the photos. I have the documents. It's her, Claudia. And because of you, I pushed her out of our lives." "Don't blame me," Claudia defended herself. "You made the decision because you planted doubts in my head," Richard shouted, his composure finally breaking. "You manipulated the situation because you're afraid of losing control over our family." "That's not true." "It is. Since Helen died, you tried to decide how Sophie and I should live our lives. But it's over, Claudia. I'm going to find my daughter. I'm going to apologize to Mary, and I'm going to rebuild my family, with or without your approval." He hung up the phone and immediately began calling all of Sophie's friends he knew. After half an hour, he managed to speak with Lucas. "Uncle Richard? She's fine. Don't worry," Lucas said carefully. "Where is she, Lucas?" "I can say she's safe, but I can't tell you where. She made me promise." "Lucas, I understand you want to protect her, but I am her father. And she's very hurt with you. Uncle, with all due respect, Sophie has never run away from home before. If she did, it's because the situation is very serious." Richard felt the weight of reality fall on his shoulders. His daughter had run away. The woman who could be the love of his life was drifting away, and he was completely alone, sitting in the empty kitchen of his home, surrounded by the wreckage of all the wrong decisions he had made. On the other side of the city, Mary couldn't sleep. She was sitting on the small balcony of her apartment in Maplewood, watching the first lights of dawn paint the sky light pink. In her hands, she held the baby photo of Sophie that she had found in the Institute's files. "How could I have been so blind?" she murmured to herself. The eyes, the gestures, even the way she crinkles her nose when she laughs. Grace appeared on the balcony wearing a floral robe, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You didn't sleep at all, did you, dear?" "How am I supposed to sleep after finding out I took care of the daughter of the man I love?" "Love?" Grace raised her eyebrows. "I thought you said it was just sympathy." "I lied, Mom. I fell in love with him from the first date, and when I met Sophie, I felt a connection I couldn't explain. Now I know why." "And what are you going to do?" "Nothing," Mary said firmly. "They have a life built together. I can't just come in and mess everything up now." "Mess up? Mary, you are part of that girl's story. You have the right—" "I have no right." Mary stood up abruptly. "I took care of her for a few months when she was a baby. Helen and Richard were her parents. I can't just show up now wanting a role that isn't mine. But what if it's fate trying to bring you together?" "Fate is cruel, Mom. It showed me what I can't have twice in my life." Grace watched her daughter with a broken heart. At 68, she had seen much pain and much happiness, and she knew how to recognize when someone was wasting a unique chance to be happy out of fear. "Mary, do you want some advice from your mother?" "I always do. Stop making decisions for others. If they want you out of their lives, let them say so, but don't give up before you fight. And if they think I manipulated the whole situation, then it's because they don't really know you. And if they don't really know you, they don't deserve you." At that moment, Mary's phone rang. It was an unknown number, and she hesitated before answering. "Hello? Mary, it's Richard. Please don't hang up." She felt her heart race, but kept her voice steady. "What do you want?" "Forgiveness. I discovered the truth about you, about Sophie, about everything, and I need to see you." "You don't need anything, Richard. You made it very clear that I was wrong, completely wrong. Mary, my daughter ran away from home because she found out who you are. She is furious with me for dismissing you." Mary felt the world spin. "She ran away. She's at a friend's house but refuses to come back until I fix the situation with you. Mary, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but can you help me bring my daughter back?" Through the window, Grace watched her daughter struggle against tears while holding the phone. She knew Mary was about to make the most important decision of her life, a decision that could finally heal the wounds she had carried for 17 years, or open them forever. The Corner Cafe was a small and cozy establishment, with exposed brick walls decorated with hanging plants and black and white photographs of local artists. The aroma of fresh coffee and homemade bread created a perfect, intimate atmosphere for difficult conversations. Richard arrived first, choosing a table in the back, away from the windows, where they could have privacy. His hands trembled slightly as he stirred the coffee he had ordered, but it remained untouched in the cup. When Mary entered, wearing a beige coat over a simple navy blue dress, his eyes filled with tears. She looked smaller, more fragile, as if the weight of the recent discoveries had taken away some of her natural vitality. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun, and she carried a document folder that she had clearly brought from the Institute. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing up to pull out the chair for her. "I'm here for Sophie," Mary replied directly, avoiding his gaze. "Where is she?" "At Lucas's house. His parents are responsible people. She's safe, but she refuses to talk to me." Mary nodded, asking for chamomile tea from the waitress who approached. "Did you tell her about our history?" "She found out on her own. She found a letter that Helen had left, explaining about the volunteer at the orphanage. When she pieced it together, Richard ran his hand through his hair. She was furious with me for not recognizing you. How could she expect you to recognize me after 17 years? Mary finally looked him in the eyes. "I was a 21-year-old girl. I looked different. But did you recognize me?" Mary fell silent for a long moment, absently fiddling with the handle of the cup. "Not consciously. But when I saw the green eyes..." As I watched Sophie at the summer festival, I felt something familiar. "And when you talked about adoption, about how you met her at the orphanage, a part of me knew, but I didn't want to believe it. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I wasn't sure, and because..." She paused, struggling against tears. "Because I didn't want you to think I had manipulated the situation, that the blind date had been planned." Richard reached across the table, gently touching her fingers. "Mary, look at me." Reluctantly, she raised her eyes. "I know you didn't plan anything, and forgive me for doubting you. My ex-sister-in-law, she planted doubts in my head, and I was weak enough to believe her." "Your ex-sister-in-law," Richard recounted Claudia's manipulations, how she had suggested that Mary might only be interested in the family's money. "She's afraid of losing influence over Sophie. Ever since Helen passed away, she's been trying to control our lives." "And you believed her?" "For a moment, yes. And it was the biggest mistake of my life." He gently squeezed her hand. "Mary, when I saw that photo of you with baby Sophie, when I read your report recommending our family for adoption, I understood that you are the missing piece in our lives." Mary withdrew her hand, wiping away the tears that were beginning to fall. "Richard, you don't understand. I can't just show up in your lives after 17 years and pretend I have some right to her." "But you do." "I don't," she said louder, causing some people in the cafe to look in their direction. Lowering her voice, she continued, "I took care of her for a few months. Helen was her mother. You built a family, created memories, faced hardships together. I was just a temporary babysitter." "You were much more than that," Richard insisted. "You were the one who made sure she found a family. You were the one who chose us, and the way Sophie connected with you instantly at the summer festival. She doesn't know who I am, but her heart knows, just like mine knew from the first meeting that you were special." Mary opened the folder she had brought, pulling out some yellow documents. "I want you to see something." She showed a photo he had never seen before. Young Mary holding baby Sophie in her arms, both asleep in a rocking chair at the orphanage. "I took this photo," said a familiar voice behind them. They turned to see Sister Beatrice approaching, accompanied by a young woman with brown hair and green eyes that Richard recognized immediately. "Sophie!" He stood up quickly. "Hi, Dad," Sophie said, but her voice was distant. "Sister Beatrice called me and said you were here." "How did you get my number, dear?" Mary asked the nun. "Lucas gave it to me. I thought it was important for you three to talk together." Sophie sat down next to Mary, studying her face intently. "So it's true. You really knew me when I was a baby. I knew and loved you from the very first day. Mary admitted, her voice choked. But you need to understand, Sophie. I don't have the right to— Stop! Sophie interrupted. No more adults deciding what's best for me without asking. She turned to her father. Dad, you're an idiot. Mom Helen always said that Mary was an angel, that she took care of me as if I were her own daughter. And when we finally found her, you sent her away. Sophie, I was confused. You were scared, she corrected. Scared to love someone other than Mom. But she's not coming back, Dad. And she never will. Is that what she would want you to do, to be alone forever? Sister. Beatrice pulled a chair from the next table and joined the group. Can I tell you the rest of the story? Everyone nodded silently. When Camille, Sophie's biological mother, arrived at the orphanage, she was very sick. Advanced stage leukemia. She knew she was going to die, but she wanted to ensure her daughter found a perfect family. Sister Beatrice looked at Mary. Mary volunteered to take care of Sophie personally. She spent 3 months working in the school during the day and sleeping at the orphanage at night to always be close to the baby. I didn't know that, Richard murmured. Mary even started the adoption process, the nun continued. But at the time, she was earning very little, living in a rental, and the social workers thought she was too young to be a single mother. That's when you two appeared. And I realized you were perfect for her, Mary added, looking at Richard. You had love, stability, maturity. Everything I couldn't offer at that time. Sophie held Mary's hand. But you could offer love. I felt that the first time I saw you. What do you mean, Sophie? Richard asked. That our family doesn't have to follow traditional rules, Sophie replied, looking back and forth between her father and Mary. Mom Helen always said that family is who we choose to love, and I choose both of you. Sophie, Mary tried to protest. No, let me finish. Dad, you gave me everything a daughter could want, security, education, love, but I always felt like something was missing. Now I know what it was. She turned to Mary. And you have always been part of my story, even without me knowing. You were the one who placed me in their arms. You were the one who made sure I had the best family possible. How does that not give you the right to be in my life? Tears streamed freely down the faces of everyone at the table. Sister Beatrice smiled, recognizing the sacred moment she was witnessing. There's one thing you still don't know, she said softly. Camille, Sophie's biological mother, asked one specific thing of Mary before she died. What? Sophie asked. She asked Mary to promise that she would always take care of you. Even from afar, it would be like a backup mother in case anything happened to your adoptive parents. Oh, my God, Richard whispered. When Helen died, Mary was fulfilling a promise she made 17 years ago, Sister Beatrice concluded. Fate just found a way to bring you together. Sophie looked at Mary with shining eyes. So you are my backup, Mom? Mary laughed through tears. If you want me to be. I do. And I want you to be more than that too. She looked at her father. Dad, do you love her? Richard looked into Mary's eyes. More than I thought it was possible to love someone again. And you, Mary, do you love my dad? Mary hesitated. For a moment, then slowly nodded. Since the first meeting. Sophie clapped her hands, making the whole cafe look at them. Then it's decided. We're going to be a real family. Sophie, it's not that simple, Richard tried to explain. Why not? You love each other. I love both of you, and clearly the entire universe conspired to bring us together. What else needs to happen? Sister Beatrice stood up, kissing Sophie's forehead. I'll leave you three to talk about the future. But remember, miracles happen for those who have the courage to accept them. When the nun walked away, the three fell silent for a moment, each processing the magnitude of what had happened. So, Sophie finally said, when are you going to get married? Sophie! Richard and Mary exclaimed in unison, making her laugh. "What? We've already lost 17 years. Let's not waste any more time, shall we?" And for the first time in weeks, the three laughed together, feeling that they were finally in the right place, at the right time, with the right people. Claudia Morgan's apartment in the Upper West Side perfectly reflected her personality. Immaculate, elegant, and coldly calculated. Italian designer furniture, carefully selected, artwork, and a stunning view of the city created an impressive yet unwelcoming atmosphere. That Saturday afternoon, she nervously paced the living room, holding a glass of white wine while watching the traffic on Park Avenue through the window of the 20th floor. The phone rang, interrupting her anxious thoughts. "Claudia? It's Margaret," said the voice of the housekeeper who had worked for Richard for over 10 years. "You asked me to call if anything unusual happened here." "What is it?" Claudia asked, trying to sound casual. "Sophie came home this morning, and she's not alone." "What do you mean?" "She's not alone. That girl Dr. Richard was getting to know, the teacher, and she's here too. They're in the kitchen making lunch together, laughing a lot. It seems like they are back on good terms." Claudia felt her blood run cold. After Richard's furious call 3 days earlier, she had hoped he would calm down and realize he was being hasty. The idea that he had actually rekindled his relationship with Mary was unacceptable. "Thank you, Margaret. You can hang up." She immediately dialed Richard, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried Sophie next, with the same result. Desperate, she put on a white blouse, black dress pants and heels, and drove to Upper West Side. When she arrived at Richard's apartment, using her spare key, she found a scene that made her feel like a stranger in enemy territory. In the spacious gourmet kitchen, Sophie was teaching Mary how to make gnocchi, while Richard chopped ingredients for the sauce. The three were chatting animatedly, a natural intimacy permeating the atmosphere. "Not like that, Mary," Sophie laughed, showing how to shape the dough. "You have to do it with a fork, look. I've always been terrible in the kitchen," Mary admitted, trying to mimic the girl's movements. "My mum always says I was born to eat, not to cook." "Mum Helen was like that too," Richard commented, seasoning the tomato sauce. "She could burn even boiling water." "Hey!" Sophie protested, throwing flour at her dad. "You can't talk bad about Mom." "I'm not talking bad, I'm speaking the truth," he laughed, retaliating with a bit of sauce on his daughter's nose. It was in that moment of family happiness that Claudia decided to announce herself, knocking on the kitchen door with enough force to make everyone turn. "What a lively party," she said with a forced smile, analyzing the domestic scene before her. The atmosphere changed instantly. Richard tensed, Sophie rolled her eyes, and Mary slightly recoiled, wiping her hands on the floral apron she was wearing. "Claudia," Richard said dryly, "what are you doing here?" "I came to check if you were okay. I heard Sophie had run away from home." "I didn't run away," Sophie firmly corrected. "I went to a friend's house because my dad was acting like an idiot. But now that he's back to normal, I'm home." "Normal?" Claudia repeated, her gaze fixed on Mary. "And that includes bringing strangers into our family?" "Careful, Claudia," Richard warned, his voice taking on a dangerous tone. "I'm not a stranger," Mary said softly but firmly. "I've known Sophie since she was a baby." "Oh, yes," Claudia smiled sarcastically. "The convenient coincidence. What luck, don't you think? After 17 years you just happened to meet on a television show." "Aunt Claudia, stop it," Sophie interjected. "Sophie, dear, you're too young to understand how malicious people can manipulate situations. The only malicious person here is you." Sophie exploded, her cheeks turning red with anger. "Mary has never done me any harm. You're the one filling my dad's head with paranoia." "Sophie, don't talk to your aunt like that," Richard said automatically, but without conviction. "Why not? She's trying to destroy our happiness." Claudia turned to Mary, who had remained silent during the discussion. "And you? Aren't you going to defend yourself?" I don't need to defend myself against something I didn't do, Mary calmly replied. But I understand your concern for Sophie. It's natural to want to protect those we love. How understanding, Claudia retorted. But tell me one thing. What exactly is your plan here? To marry Richard and become an instant millionaire stepmother? Enough! Richard slammed his hand on the counter, causing the kitchen utensils to jump. Claudia, you've crossed the line. Crossed the line? Richard, open your eyes. This woman shows up out of nowhere with a wild story about taking care of Sophie at the orphanage. It's not wild, it's true, Sophie shouted, running to her room and returning with the folder of documents. Look here, photos, reports, everything proving that Mary knew me before you did. Claudia took the documents with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the pages as her expression changed, from skepticism to surprise and finally to shock. This can't be true, she murmured, studying a photo of young Mary with baby Sophie. It is true, Sophie said triumphantly. Mary was the one who recommended my parents for my adoption. She's been part of our family for 17 years, and you didn't even know. Claudia leaned against the kitchen counter, clearly shaken by the revelation. Helen never told me. Because it wasn't important to her, Richard explained, his tone softening slightly. Helen focused on the present, not the past. She knew that Mary had helped us, but she didn't think it was necessary to keep in touch. And now she comes back just when Sophie is about to turn 18 and gain access to the trust fund, Claudia insisted, although her voice had lost some of its conviction. Money again? Mary finally lost her patience. Mrs. Claudia, I've been working as an educator for 15 years. I support my mother. I have my own life. I didn't even know Richard had money when we met in the program. Anyone can look someone up on the internet these days. Enough! Sophie shouted so loudly that even the neighbors must have heard. Aunt Claudia, can't you accept that Dad might be happy with someone other than Mom? The silence that followed was deafening. Claudia turned pale, Sophie's words hitting exactly the sensitive spot she had tried to hide. Sophie is right, Richard said quietly. Claudia, you can't accept that I can move on. Helen was my sister, Claudia exploded, tears finally escaping. She was all I had, and now you want to erase her from memory as if she never existed. No one wants to erase anything, Mary gently approached Claudia. Mrs. Claudia, can I tell you something? Claudia looked at her suspiciously, but nodded. When I recommended Richard and Helen for Sophie's adoption, it was because I saw something special in them. The love between them was so pure, so genuine, that I knew immediately that Sophie would be happy with them. And she was, Claudia whispered. She was. And Helen was a wonderful mother from what I see in the woman Sophie has become. Mary delicately took Claudia's hands. I didn't come here to replace Helen. No one ever could. I came because fate gave me a second chance to care for the girl I loved since she was a baby, and to love the man I chose to be her father. Did you really love her, even when she was a baby? As if she were my own daughter. And when I had to hand her over to you, I cried for weeks. But I knew I was doing the right thing. Claudia looked at Mary's sincere face, then at Sophie, who was watching her with hope in her green eyes, and finally at Richard, who seemed more relaxed and happy than she had seen since Helen's death. I don't know how to deal with this, she finally admitted. Since Helen died, I've been afraid of losing you too. You will never lose us, Sophie stepped closer, hugging her aunt. But you have to stop trying to control our lives. We have the right to be happy, even if that means changing the dynamics of our family. It means expanding our family, Richard corrected, putting his arm around Mary. Helen always said that love multiplied is love divided. There's room for all of us. Claudia remained silent for a long moment, watching the family forming before her. Slowly, she extended her hand to Mary. I'm sorry for everything I said and did. You really love them, don't you?" "With all my heart," Mary replied, squeezing the offered hand. "Then welcome to the family," Claudia said, a genuine smile finally appearing on her face. "And forgive me, but can I help finish lunch? I'm starving and this sauce smell is driving me crazy." Sophie laughed, and the tension in the room finally dissipated. "Of course, Aunt, you can make the salad. But be careful not to compete with Mary in the worst cook in the family category." "Hey," Mary protested, laughing, "I'm still learning." And so, for the first time in 5 years, the Morgan family's kitchen, filled with laughter, conversation, and the aroma of a meal prepared with love, by 4 people who had finally understood that family is not defined by blood or conventions, but by the conscious choice to love and accept one another. The winter in New York had arrived in full force, bringing cold mornings and sunny afternoons that created a perfect contrast to the conflicting feelings Mary had been experiencing. She had temporarily moved into a rented apartment in Brooklyn, closer to Richard and Sophie, but also to have her own space to process all the changes in her life. That Saturday morning, while organizing her belongings in the modest yet cozy living room, her phone rang. "Mary, you need to come here urgently." Grace's voice sounded agitated. "I found something you need to see." "Mum, what happened?" "I can't talk on the phone, just come quickly." An hour later, Mary was sitting in her mother's kitchen in Maplewood, watching Grace rummage through a dusty box that had come down from the attic. The house was silent, only the distant sound of children playing outside breaking the tension of the moment. "I was looking for some old photos to show Richard when he comes for dinner next week," Grace explained, pulling yellow documents from the box. "And I found... here." She extended a sealed envelope to Mary with the name Camille Smith written in cursive on the front. "Where did you find this?" "It was stuck at the bottom of the box. I didn't even know it existed." Grace sat heavily in the chair next to her daughter. "Mary, there's something I never told you about Camille." "What do you mean?" "She wasn't just a stranger who arrived at the orphanage. She was our relative." Mary felt the world spin around her. "What do you mean, our relative?" "A distant cousin of your great-grandmother. When I learned that a Smith was at the orphanage, I visited her a few times. That's how you found out about Sophie's situation." "Mom!" Mary exclaimed, her voice rising. "Why didn't you tell me this?" "Because Camille made me promise not to tell anyone. She was ashamed of her situation, didn't want the family to know she was dying and couldn't care for her own daughter." With trembling hands, Mary opened the envelope and found a letter and some photographs. The letter was dated September 2008, a month before Sophie's adoption. "My dear cousin Grace," Mary read aloud, "if you are reading this letter, it means I have passed and left my little Sophie in the care of the orphanage. I know your daughter Mary has taken care of her with much love, and for that, I want to record here some secrets that only you should know." Mary stopped reading, looking at her mother with tears in her eyes. "Did she know you were my mother?" "She did, and she knew how attached you had become to Sophie. That's why she asked me to give you this letter only if one day you met again. And you thought today was that day? When you told me about the reunion with her and Richard, I knew it was time." Mary continued reading, her voice becoming more choked. "Sophie's father is not unknown, as I put in the official documents. He is a married, influential man who never knew about the pregnancy. When I discovered I was ill, I made the decision not to tell him about his daughter, so as not to destroy her family. But if one day my Sophie wants to know her origins, his name is on the photo I leave with this letter." Mary picked up the photographs with trembling hands. The first was of Camille as a young woman, holding baby Sophie. The second was of a man in a suit, smiling at the camera at what appeared to be a social event. On the back of the photo, it was written, "Dr. Edward Morgan, father of Sophie, April 2007. Morgan, Mary whispered, feeling as if she had been punched in the stomach. It's the same last name as Richard, Grace observed quietly. My God, that means that Sophie could be related to Richard, cousin, niece. We don't know the degree of kinship. Mary stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. Mum, this changes everything. If she's blood related to him. Or it changes nothing, Grace interrupted. Mary, they have been father and daughter for 17 years. A document won't change that. But it will change how Richard sees me. He'll think I knew, that I hid this from him. You didn't know. But who will believe that? First, I show up as the volunteer, who cared for Sophie. Now I discover she's related to his family. It's too much of a coincidence. Grace stood up and firmly held her daughter's shoulders. Mary Smith, listen to me. You did nothing wrong. Fate is weaving a complicated web, but you are not responsible for the secrets that others kept. And what if Richard thinks I manipulated everything from the beginning? Then he's an idiot and doesn't deserve you. At that moment, Mary's phone rang. It was Sophie. Mary, can you come over to my house? Dad wants to talk to us about something important. Important how? He didn't say, but he seems nervous. It must be about our future as a family. Mary looked at her mother, still holding the photos and the letter. Sophie, can I ask you something? Do you have any relative named Edward? Edward? I have an uncle Edward, my dad's brother. Why? Mary felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Nothing, just curiosity. I'm on my way. After hanging up, she turned to Grace. Mum, Edward Morgan is Richard's brother. That means Sophie is his biological niece. Jesus, Mary, Grace crossed herself. This family is more intertwined than a soap opera. And now, what do I do? You go there and tell the truth, all of it, and let them decide what to do with this information. Mary nodded, carefully putting the documents in her bag. Before leaving, she hugged her mother tightly. Mum, what if this destroys everything we've built? And if it strengthens it? Mary, you've been through so much to get here. If your love is true, it will survive this revelation. 40 minutes later, Mary was back in the kitchen of the Morgan family, but this time the atmosphere was charged with tension. Richard was nervously pacing the kitchen while Sophie made tea for everyone, trying to disguise her own anxiety. Mary, thank you for coming, Richard said, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek. I need to talk to you both about something I discovered today. Actually, I also have something important to tell, Mary said, tightening the strap of her bag. You first, he insisted, sitting at the table. Richard, Sophie, what I'm about to tell you could change everything between us, and I need you to know that I discovered this just an hour ago. She pulled the documents from her bag, placing them on the table. Sophie, your biological mother left a letter to be opened only if you two ever reunited. What kind of letter? Sophie asked, stepping closer. A letter revealing who your biological father is. Richard turned pale. Mary, I don't know if... It's Edward Morgan, she said directly. Your brother, Richard. Sophie is your biological niece. The silence that followed was absolute. Sophie alternated her gaze between the photo and her father, while Richard read and reread the letter with an incredulous expression. My brother, he finally murmured, my brother is her father. That explains why. I've always felt such a strong connection to you both, Sophie said quietly, touching the photo of her biological father. It wasn't just affection. It was real family. Sophie, this doesn't change anything between us, Richard was quick to say. You have always been and will always be my daughter. I know, Dad. But it explains a lot. She looked at Mary. And you? How do you feel knowing you cared for your own niece without knowing? Scared, Mary admitted. Scared that you think I knew that I manipulated all of this. Richard stood up and pulled Mary into a tight embrace. How could you have manipulated something that even your own mother didn't fully know? So you believe me? Mary, if after everything we've been through I still doubted you, I would be the biggest fool in the world. What a relief, she sighed, relaxing in his arms. But now I need to tell you what I found out today, Richard said, gently releasing her. I hired a private investigator to locate Edward. What? Sophie exclaimed. Why? Because I thought you deserved to know your biological father if you wanted to, but what he found... Richard paused, taking a deep breath. Edward died 3 years ago. Cancer. Sophie felt her legs go weak and leaned against the counter. He died without ever knowing I existed? According to the investigator, yes. He never knew about you. So I'll never be able to meet him, she whispered, tears beginning to fall. But you can learn about him, Richard said softly. The investigator gave me the contact of his widow, your rightful aunt. She has 2 daughters, your half-sisters. Sophie looked at Mary and Richard, processing the magnitude of the day's revelations. So, in one day, I found out I'm my adoptive father's niece, that my biological father died without knowing me, and that I have half-sisters who don't even know I exist. It's a tough day to process, Mary admitted. But you know what's crazier? Sophie said, wiping her tears. As confusing as everything is, I feel complete. For the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am and where I belong. She looked at Richard. You are my father, my uncle, and my hero. Then she looked at Mary. You are... Well, I still don't know exactly what you are, but I know I love you and want you in my life. And I love you too, Mary replied, embracing the young woman. Regardless of any relation or coincidence, you will always be special to me. Richard watched the 2 women embrace and felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. All the pieces of the puzzle were finally fitting together, creating a picture that, although complex, was absolutely perfect. Well, he said, smiling, I think our family just got even more interesting. The autumn in the Bay Area had come to an end, and the first summer rains began to wash the city, preparing it for a new cycle. In Mary's apartment in the West Side, moving boxes were scattered around the living room, some already sealed, others still open, reflecting the indecision that dominated her thoughts. She had requested a transfer to a school in the outskirts of the Bay Area, 200 kilometers from New York City, claiming a need for a change of scenery to the Education Board. Sophie was sitting on the floor of the living room, helping to pack textbooks, but her hands moved mechanically while her green eyes showed deep sadness. You can't leave, she said for the 10th time that afternoon. Not now that we've discovered everything. Sophie, dear, Mary sighed, carefully folding a shirt. Sometimes loving someone means giving that person space to find their own path. What kind of cheap philosophy is that? Sophie stood up abruptly, her brown hair flying around her face. You're running away because you're scared. I'm not running away. You are! Sophie crossed her arms, taking a defiant stance that very much resembled Richard when he was determined. My dad finally managed to overcome Mom Helen's death. I finally understood my story. Our family finally makes sense. And you decide to disappear? Mary stopped organizing the clothes and turned to face the young woman. At 17, Sophie had matured a lot in the past few weeks, and her insight sometimes scared Mary. Sophie, you don't understand. Your Aunt Claudia is right about one thing. I'm a stranger who suddenly came into your lives. You took care of me when I was a baby. For 3 months. 3 months, Sophie. Your dad raised you for 17 years. He deserves someone who doesn't come with all this complicated emotional baggage. What baggage? Sophie moved closer, sitting on the edge of the sofa. Mary, explain to me what baggage this is. Mary sat next to the young woman, taking her hands. Dear, I fell in love with you before I even really knew you. When you were a baby, you were my motherhood fantasy. Now, discovering that you are Richard's biological niece, it's like fate is playing with us. And what's wrong with that? I'm afraid that you'll feel obligated to include me in the family out of guilt or pity. I'm afraid Richard will marry me because it's the right thing to do, not because he truly loves me. Sophie fell silent for a moment, observing Mary's worried face. Then, to the older woman's surprise, she started to laugh. Mary, have you seen my dad when he's with you? What do you mean? He becomes different, lighter, happier. For the first time since Mom died, I see my dad really smiling. Sophie squeezed Mary's hands. And do you know why I know he truly loves you? Why? Because last night I heard him crying in his room. Mary felt her heart tighten. Crying? He was on the phone. With Uncle Edward's widow talking about you, and when he hung up, I heard him sobbing and saying, I can't lose her too, Helen, I can't. Tears began to stream down Mary's face. Sophie. Mary, my dad is in love with you, really, in a way he never thought he could be with anyone after Mom. And what if it doesn't work out? What if your aunt's family, Uncle Edward's widow, doesn't accept it? Then that's their problem, not ours. Sophie stood up, taking on a determined air. Mary Smith, you are going to stop packing those things right now and talk to my dad. Sophie, I can't. Yes, you can. And do you know why? Because I need you to. Because I found out that I'm going to meet my half-sisters next week, and I'm terrified, and I need my whole family to support me. Mary paused in the middle of closing a box. You're going to meet Edward's daughters? Anna contacted me on Facebook. She's 15 and Lily is 12. Their mum, Aunt Rebecca, wants to meet us. And how do you feel about that? Terrified, Sophie admitted, her voice getting small. What if they don't like me? What if they think I'm an intruder trying to invade their family? Oh, sweetheart. Mary stood up and hugged Sophie. They're going to adore you. How could they not? You think? I'm sure. You're smart, caring, funny. Anyone would be happy to have a sister like you. So you understand why I need you and Dad together? I need my whole family to face this. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Sophie ran to the window and peeked outside. It's him, she announced, returning to the room. And he looks awful. Sophie, I'm not ready to... Mary, if you don't open that door, I'm going to tell him that you're moving. For love, not out of fear. Mary looked at the young girl in shock. You're terrible when you want to be. I learned from the best. Now go open the door. When Mary opened the door, she found Richard in a state she had never seen before. His hair was messy, as if he had run his hands through it countless times. His dress shirt was wrinkled, and his eyes showed a mix of desperation and determination. You can't leave, he said bluntly. Richard, no, let me talk. He stepped into the apartment, immediately noticing the boxes scattered around. Mary, if you leave now, you're destroying the best thing that has happened in my life since, well, forever. Richard, sit here. Sophie pulled her dad to the sofa. You two need to talk like adults. Sophie, this is between me and Mary. No, it's not. It's about our family, and I am part of this family. Sophie positioned herself between them, hands on her hips. Now you two are going to sit down, stop being scared, and decide once and for all if you want to be together or not. Richard and Mary exchanged glances, surprised by the young girl's firmness. She's right, Richard finally said. Mary, I love you. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, not because of the past. I love you because you made me remember that I can still feel joy. I love you because when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about is seeing you smile. I love you because you brought light back into my life and into Sophie's life. But Richard, it's so complicated. And so what? He interrupted, rising and kneeling before her. Mary, life is complicated. But you know what I've discovered? Complicated. Gets easier when you have the right person by your side. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, making Sophie gasp in surprise. Richard, what are you doing? What I should have done a long time ago. He opened the box, revealing a simple yet elegant engagement ring with a solitaire that sparkled under the light of the room. Mary Smith, will you marry me? Oh my God! Sophie clapped her hands, bouncing around. Dad, you're amazing! Sophie, shh, Mary said. But she was laughing and crying at the same time. Mary, Richard continued, still kneeling. I know. Our story is different, complex, full of impossible coincidences. But I also know that when I'm with you, I feel like I'm exactly where I should be. And what if people think it's strange? What if your family, my family, is you and Sophie? The rest is detail. He took her hand. And as for people thinking it's strange, well, our story has always been strange. Why change that now? Sophie sat on the floor in front of them, watching the scene with tears of happiness in her eyes. Mary, please say yes. I've already picked out the bridesmaid dress. Mary looked at Richard, then at Sophie, and finally at the ring sparkling in the box. She thought of all the fears, all the complications, all the obstacles they might still face. Then she thought of the promise she made to Camille 17 years ago to always take care of Sophie, and realized that fate had found the perfect way to fulfill that promise. Yes, she whispered, extending her trembling hand. Yes? Richard asked, not believing it. Yes, of course, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, then stood up and kissed her, while Sophie squealed with joy and jumped around them. Yay, we're having a wedding. Can I choose the flowers and the menu and the music? Sophie, one thing at a time, Richard laughed, embracing the two women in his life. We have to unpack these boxes, Sophie declared, already heading for the moving boxes. After all, Mary isn't going to Bay Area anymore, right? Definitely not, Mary confirmed, admiring the ring on her hand. While Sophie happily busied herself unpacking the boxes, Richard and Mary stayed embraced, watching the young girl who there had been a bond between them from the very beginning. I think we should thank Helen, Mary murmured. Why? For raising a daughter who doesn't give up easily when she sees the people she loves being happy. Richard smiled, kissing the top of Mary's head. Helen would approve of you, I'm sure of it. How can you be so sure? Because she always said that true love finds a way. And look, he gestured to Sophie, who was humming while unpacking books. Love found the most impossible and perfect way of all. Outside, the first summer rains continued to wash over the city, preparing New York for the renewal that came with each new season. And inside the apartment, a family was getting ready to formalize what the heart had decided a long time ago. Central Park was magnificently decorated for the December holiday celebrations. Thousands of LED lights created a carpet of stars along the paths, while the century-old trees donned golden lights that danced gently in the warm summer breeze. The aroma of French toast and hot-spiced wine from the vendors mingled with the fragrance of the garden flowers, creating a magical atmosphere that seemed to have come straight out of a fairy tale. Mary walked hand in hand with Richard down the main path, watching Sophie ahead, animatedly chatting with two teenagers who had become her inseparable companions in recent months. Anna, 15, was a younger version of Sophie, brown hair and expressive eyes, but with a shy smile that contrasted with the outgoing personality of her older half-sister. Lily, 12, resembled the late Edward more physically, darker hair, fair skin, and an insatiable curiosity about everything around her. "Sophie, tell us again how you found out about us," Lily asked, skipping to walk backward as she spoke. "Lily, you've heard that story 1,000 times." Anna laughed, but it was clear she also loved hearing about the impossible coincidences that had brought the family together. "But it's so amazing," Lily insisted. "It's like Dad planned everything from up in heaven for us to meet." Rebecca Morgan, Edward's widow, walked alongside Claudia a few meters behind. At 42, she was an elegant and reserved woman with short blonde hair and blue eyes that displayed a serenity that came from maturity. Initially skeptical about Sophie's sudden appearance, she had become one of the young woman's greatest advocates after learning the full story. "Claudia, you were right when you, said family is complicated," Rebecca commented, watching the three girls laugh together. "But I never imagined complicated could be so perfect." "I was wrong about a lot of things," Claudia admitted, adjusting her beige wool coat. "Especially about Mary. She truly loves our family. And you all love her too. Just look at Richard watching her." The two women observed Richard stop to tie Mary's shoelace, a simple gesture but filled with affection that made both smile. "Rebecca," Claudia said hesitantly, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "How did you manage to accept all of this so quickly? The existence of Sophie, the fact that Edward never told." Rebecca fell silent for a moment, watching the park lights reflect on the artificial lake in the distance. "You know, Claudia, when Edward died, I was furious with him for a long time. Furious for leaving me alone with two daughters, furious for not fighting harder against cancer, furious for all the plans we never realized." She sighed softly. "But when I met Sophie, when I saw how much she resembled him, not just physically but in the way she gestures when she talks, in how she scrunches her nose when she's thinking, it was as if he had sent me a gift. A gift. A last chance to know a part of him that I had never seen. And more than that, Anna and Lily gained a wonderful older sister who is helping them cope with the loss of their father." Further ahead, the three young girls had stopped in front of the giant Christmas tree that dominated the center of the park. Sophie was explaining to her sisters about the tradition she and Richard had kept since Helen's death. "Every year we come here on December, here on 23rd, and make a wish for the next year," she said. "Mum Helen started this tradition when I was little." "And what are you going to wish for this year?" Anna asked. Sophie looked back, where Richard and Mary were quietly talking as they walked, then at Rebecca and Claudia, who were also approaching, and finally at her two new sisters. "I don't think I need to wish for anything," she said thoughtfully. "All my wishes have already come true." "All of them?" Lily insisted. "Well, almost all. There's still one thing missing." The three joined the group of adults under the Christmas tree. The tradition was for each person to make their wish silently, but this year Sophie decided to break protocol. "Guys, can I say something to all of you?" "Of course, dear," Richard replied, pulling her close. "This year has been amazing, crazy, complicated, full of surprises, but amazing." Sophie looked at each person present. "Dad, you finally allowed yourself to be happy again. Mary, you found the family you always wanted. Anna and Lily, you gained an annoying older sister." She laughed as the two protested. "Aunt Claudia, you learned to share. And Aunt Rebecca, you welcomed us even without knowing us." "Sophie, where are you going with this?" Richard asked, recognizing the solemn tone his daughter used when she had something important to say. "I want to propose something for our crazy family." Sophie took a deep breath. "How about we create a foundation in the name of my biological mother, Camille Smith?" "A foundation?" Mary asked, surprised. "To help mothers in vulnerable situations stay with their children. Or when This isn't possible to ensure that the children find loving families like I did. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Richard wrapped his arm around Sophie as tears shimmered in her eyes. "Sophie, it's perfect," he murmured. "Dad can provide the initial investment," Sophie continued, growing excited. "Mary can lead the educational projects. Aunt Rebecca has experience in administration. Aunt Claudia knows the business world. And I, Anna, and Lily can volunteer." "And where would the headquarters be?" Claudia asked, clearly interested in the idea. "At the Hope Institute," Sophie replied immediately, "where it all began. Sister Beatrice has already said she would love to expand the projects." Rebecca approached Sophie, placing her hands on the young woman's shoulders. "Sophie, are you sure you want to do this? It's a big commitment." "Aunt Rebecca, I spent 17 years not knowing where I came from. Now that I do, I want to ensure that other children don't go through that uncertainty, and I want Camille's name to be remembered for something beautiful." "Then it's decided," Richard announced, pulling all the important women in his life into a group hug. "The Camille Smith Foundation will be our first mission as an official family." "Official family?" Anna asked. "Oh, that's right," Sophie exclaimed. "We haven't told you yet. Dad and Mary are getting married next year." The joyful shout from the two younger girls echoed through the park, making other families look their way with understanding smiles. "Can I be a bridesmaid?" Lily asked eagerly. "Of course you can. You both will be bridesmaids," Mary replied, hugging the girls. "And I will be the most beautiful maid of honor in the world," Sophie declared dramatically, making everyone laugh. As the evening progressed, they continued walking through the park, each sharing memories from the past year, dreams for the future, and deep gratitude for having found each other in such an impossibly perfect way. When they finally said goodbye at the park entrance, with promises to reunite for Christmas dinner at Richard's house the next day, Mary held Sophie's hand for a moment before getting into the car. "Sophie, can I tell you something?" "Always." "Your biological mother, Camille, made me promise that I would always take care of you. At the time, I thought I was failing her when you were adopted. Today, I understand that she knew exactly what she was doing." "What do you mean?" "She knew that you didn't need me as a mother back then. You needed Dad and Mom Helen. But she also knew that one day, when you were older and they needed help raising you, I would be here." "And you are," Sophie smiled, squeezing Mary's hand. "And I always will be. Not as a replacement for Helen, but as a second mother, a friend, an older sister, whatever you need." "I need you exactly as you are," Sophie replied. "The Mary who took care of me when I was a baby, who found me when I needed her, and who will be with me for the rest of my life." When they got home, Richard found a letter that had been delivered during the day. It was from Sister Beatrice, congratulating the family on their decision to create the foundation and attaching a photo she had found in the old archives. The photo showed Camille Smith in the hospital, holding newborn Sophie, with young Mary beside the bed. On the back, in delicate handwriting, it read, "To Sophie, when you grow up, your first family, may you always remember that you were loved from your very first breath." November 2007. "She knew," Richard murmured, showing the photo to Mary and Sophie. "Camille knew we would all be here today, together." "How could she know?" Mary asked. "Maybe because true love always finds a way," Sophie replied, echoing the words Helen used to say. "And our family is proof living of that." That night, as New York prepared for another Christmas, the family that fate had spent 17 years building was finally complete. It wasn't a traditional family, but it was perfect for them. And in the apartment on the Upper West Side, 3 generations of love intertwined. The love that Camille had for Sophie, the love that Helen and Richard built, the Love that Mary had held for so many years, and the new love that grew every day among them all. On Richard's nightstand, next to the photo of Helen that would always be there, was now a new photo. Their current family, smiling under the Christmas tree in Central Park, united not only by blood or law, but by the conscious choice to love each other, with all their flaws, complications and differences. And somewhere, among the stars shining over New York that December night, two women who had never met in person, Helen and Camille, smiled, knowing that their daughters were finally where they belonged, surrounded by love, protected by a family woven by the invisible threads of fate, and ready to write the next chapter of a story that proves that some coincidences are too great to be mere chance. The promise had been fulfilled, the circle was closed, and a new story was just beginning.